Chapter 12, American Civic Association, Immigration Center, Binghamton, New York, April 3rd, 2009. Like Poppy Perez, Hoang Duc Lam was something. Hoang Duc Lam was a chef. He was always a chef. Even when he was working as a line cook or sous chef, he had that flair, that extra something that other folks handling food just don't have. In his native Vietnamese, Lam would say, "Of course I'm a chef. Last two names, Duc Lam, Duck Lam. What else could I be?" Lam was smart. Very, very smart. When his family escaped Vietnam in a death trap of a small boat back in 1975, Lam, all of 5 at the time, looked around, saw where the anchor was tied, wrapped himself around the heavy rope, and wouldn't let go. Before his vessel was found 3 days later, of the 35 men, women, and children who had crowded onto this boat, only 6 had not been washed overboard, including Lam. His father, mother, and older sister had been carried off before his eyes. He had screamed, he had cried, but he never let go of the rope. Of the 6 that survived, all had been from the same village of An Dien, about 25 miles from Saigon. An Dien had suffered terrible shelling during the last months of the war, so these 6 had survived more than 3 days of storms in a rickety boat. Of the 6, there was one young married couple. Pham Thanh Minh had been a soldier in the South Vietnamese Army. His wife, Trung Thai Kim, worked for the government in Saigon. Both knew that if they were captured by either the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong, they were dead. They looked at the boat when they got in, huddled near the bow, keeping their heads low, and like Lam, they survived. Kim was unable to have children. They had considered adoption, but it had been hesitant. Now, like some kind of macabre blessing, there was a little 5-year-old boy in need of parents. Lam became part of their family, moved with them to Camp Pendleton in San Diego. After a period of resettlement, Minh heard there was a large Vietnamese population in San Jose, California. Through the help of a voluntary agency, VOLAG, who helped find them temporary financial and personal support, they moved there in early 1977. The Phams landed in San Jose knowing 2 things. They needed employment, and fast, and they needed to learn their new native language, and faster, so they could get better employment. Kim was a little more proficient in English due to time in the South Vietnamese government, but she knew she needed more than the limited knowledge she had. All 3 attended several ESL, English as Second Language, classes in area high schools, but never felt comfortable until they became the first students at the Golden Gate Language School in 1979. By the early 1980s, Minh and Kim were proficient enough in English to complete the study necessary to become naturalized citizens. On the wall of their San Jose home was a framed Mercury News page dated January 17, 1983. Minh and Kim holding their citizenship certificates, little Lam between them, holding a cupcake with an 8 lit candle celebrating his 8th birthday. By 1985, Minh was working for the San Jose city government as a liaison to the fast-growing Vietnamese community. Kim had found a position with a new restaurant in town, Vung Tau, named for a Vietnamese port city the owners had emigrated from, authentic Vietnamese cuisine featuring 8 soups from 8 regions. Depending on her schedule, Kim would pick Lam up from elementary, then middle, then San Jose High School, and he'd spend the afternoon and evening working in the Vung Tau kitchen. Lam loved everything about the cooking process. He loved the smell, the feel of a restaurant kitchen. He loved the quick, almost frenetic pace. He loved how he felt when he had mastered a knife cut, or a traditional soup preparation, or even when a plate went out looking, as he put it, camera ready. He loved to cook. Initially, he'd help with food preparation and occasionally bussing tables. He went from that to what restaurants would call a line cook, then a sous chef, all before the age of 18. To broaden his culinary horizons, Lam also worked 3 nights a week at Original Joe's restaurant, an Italian-American San Jose staple. It was during this period of working Vietnamese one night, Italian the next, that Lam began to wonder and play with, combining cultures in a spirited, light-handed way. He personally was not a fan of change for the sake of change. What he was a fan of was change as an improved offshoot of an original. Change with a fun twist. Unexpected yet delightful change. Food that was surprise and delight. Wink and a smile cuisine. In the early spring of 1988, Lam, Min, and Kim sat down to discuss Lam's next move. Although he would never forget the tragic moment when he lost his entire family, Min and Kim had been every bit as much a father and mother to him, taking him in when he literally had nothing, giving him love and respect, making it possible for him to receive every benefit available in this new life he'd made. Kim had even introduced him to the career he wanted to pursue. The challenge was that he wanted to pursue it in New York. The Culinary Institute of America had been founded in 1946 for GIs returning home from World War II. It had grown from a vocational school in a storefront to a campus, dormitories, and restaurants in Hyde Park, New York. That's where Lam wanted to go. His grades were above average, even though he'd been working 2 restaurant jobs a week for the past 2 years. He had letters of recommendation from the owners of Vung Tao and Original Joe's. He'd saved close to $10,000, which would get him there and get him enrolled. That's what he wanted, but only if that's what Min and Kim wanted for him. He loved them. He respected them. He saw firsthand what they had gone through for him to be sitting at that kitchen table with them that night. Among the many sacrifices they made was the decision back in 1979 to speak only English in the household so that Lam would be able to go to the American school rather than the Vietnamese schools beginning to pop up in the area. And so they spoke English around their dinner room table, appropriate considering the discussion, that night, going over scenarios, considering alternatives. Finally, Min spoke the words Lam was very anxious to hear. Lam, you have been like a son to Kim and I. Honestly, we have considered you our own ever since that terrible day when we realized your family was gone. We only went over your plans to see if there was anything that would not be possible. But with you, Lam, everything is possible. We support your decision. We will help you any way we can. Lam had never seen either of them cry, even when they became citizens. He looked across the table. Both had tears streaming down their face. We will miss you, my son. It was the very first time Min had ever said that to him. Lam broke down. Finally he said, I will give it my all. I will succeed. I will make you proud, mother and father. Lam succeeded, probably beyond his wildest expectations. CIA not only gave him the foundation he needed for success, but it also gave him access to some of the most brilliant culinary minds in the country, also just beginning their careers. Chefs like Melissa Kelly, Johnny Hernandez, Amanda Freitag, Michael Mina, Steve Ellis, Trey Foshi, Sonia Arias, and Michael Simon were members of the student body when Lam was there. Creative as well as practical, imaginative as well as basic. 4 restaurants on campus, state-of-the-art test kitchens, a culinary library, career planning center, a continuing education center, even experimental kitchens, and a food laboratory covering the science of cooking. Lam was surrounded by food. He was awash in food. There was food to admire, food to touch, food to prepare, food to display, food to play with, food to be daring with, even food to make hideous mistakes and learn with. Lam graduated with honors in 1990 with an enormously proud Min and Kim in attendance. Over dinner that night, they discussed what he felt his next move should be. He felt that as a recently minted graduate of CIA, he would not have an investor rushing up to him, wad of cash in hand, insisting that he open a Vietnamese fusion restaurant. However, he felt he had not only the talent, but also the work ethic necessary to do exactly that. What he needed to do was get in front of the right people. Knowledgeable, discerning, wealthy people. Lam, Min, and Kim came up with a 2-pronged strategy involving the higher-end hotel chains and the major food cities in the United States. Lam would try to sign on with resorts or major hotels, preferably chains, actively seek positions in major cities, and show any and all his work ethic and culinary skills. He'd also take advantage of the extensive CIA alumni network in getting his potential food brand in front of those who might be able to further his career. First stop for Lam would be close to home. The famous Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, home to the Academy Award-winning movie Some Like It Hot, would be his culinary home for 2 years. From the massive weekend brunch to prepping room service, Lam would do anything and everything asked of him. From there, it was an entirely different setting. Boynton Canyon, Sedona, Arizona, and the Enchantment Resort. Although the setting was dissimilar, the expectations were decidedly not. First class was required. First class was expected. It might have been the canyon or being surrounded by all the beauty and serene spirituality Sedona offers, but Lam would always say that the 3 years he spent in the Enchantment Resort were among the 3 best of his life. He had Min and Kim visit him 2 or 3 times a year. Every visit, they would find a new trail to hike, a new park to visit, a new overlook into the Red Rock Buttes. Lam's creativity was at a remarkably high level. It was during this period that he was able to not only begin to create his distinctive brand and flavors, but also a vision of what his restaurant would look and feel like, even down to the menu and tableware. He was being introduced to cultures and flavors. When an item or dish sparked his interest, on his own time he'd research, reinvent, reimagine. He called it his playtime. Many was the morning the prep staff would enter the kitchen and find Lam, oblivious to time, working on something. But even then, Lam knew that one day he would oversee a kitchen like this, maybe even with these same people. So he would stop what he was doing and pitch in with the prep, even if he wasn't supposed to be there until dinner. That's how he got his first nickname, N.G. Lam. NG for nice guy. In 1996, Lam again made a 180-degree turn from the serenity of Sedona to the bright lights of Las Vegas, signing on as a sous chef for the April 30th grand opening of the Strat Hotel, Casino, and Tower. Although he would never say this was one of his favorite places of employment, he would state that it gave him an excellent method of learning how to open a new restaurant, or group of restaurants, and a few things not to do, which was all recorded in a large journal he'd begun to keep in Sedona. Outside the journal was the name of his future restaurant, Vit Kiru Andem, a Vietnamese play on his name, plus the place where he was born. Lam ultimately became chef de cuisine for the Strat's Buffet, a staple with all Las Vegas hotels, and at age 27, one of the youngest chefs on the Strip. But it was on the buffet that he began sneaking one of his creations here and there, seeing how much of the dish was left and checking customer reactions. It was a far different classroom than his other stops, but it was a classroom nonetheless. He stayed at the Strat for a year, then slowly started his journey eastward, beginning with the Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek in Dallas and his first executive chef position of their restaurant Terrace. 2 years later, he accepted the executive chef position with the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans and their famous 24-hour upscale food restaurant, Bailey's. Lam remained at Bailey's, learning and refining until early 2002, when he decided to head to New York in a temporary sous chef position at Union Pacific, operated by fellow CIA alum Rocco DiSpirito. He understood that the town had been physically and mentally decimated by 9/11. He also knew that a city like New York would turn their fortunes around faster than any other city on the planet. Also in New York were lots of Culinary Institute of America graduates, Rocco being among them. He planned on visiting quite a few. And he did. And his future progressed at a very quick pace. May 5th, 2005 was the 30th anniversary of the day the U.S. destroyer had rescued the 6 scared, freezing Vietnamese from a rickety sailboat in the middle of the South China Sea. May 5th, 2005 was also the opening night of Vit Kiru Andem, a Vietnamese fusion, several fusions actually, 60-seat eatery in Manhattan. Lam had met and cooked some more. Finally, several CIA alumni, restaurateurs themselves, came up with seed money for the new restaurant. They were the minority partners. Representing the majority partners were a 61-year-old man and a 59-year-old woman who had been on the same boat as the proprietor and executive chef. They had gone to the leaders of the Vietnamese population in San Jose, who had for years lent money to fellow immigrants to start businesses in the area. New York City was a stretch. However, for this family, it was one of the easiest, most painless loans they had ever made. After the food was eaten and the toasts were made, Lam, in his emerald blue seat-colored executive chef jacket, stood in front of fellow CIA alumni, friends from all over the country, and his brand new staff. He looked at them and his restaurant, a 7-color ocean dream come to reality. And then his eyes fell on the 61-year-old man, Pham Thanh Minh, and the 59-year-old woman, Trung Tha Kim, and he tried to speak, and he could not. Finally, with love and encouragement, he was able to say, "Friends, I hope you will forgive me for not thanking you tonight. Know that I will never forget your kindnesses, for tonight belongs to 2 people, afraid to stay and live in their own country, who dared to board a boat that could not sail, that barely could float, who believed there was a dream they could follow in a new land. The most amazing part of their already amazing journey was that they chose to bring a scared 5-year-old boy with them, a boy who had watched his parents and his sister swept overboard, a boy who didn't know what to do. Day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, these good, kind, decent people taught me what to do. Today is the 30th anniversary of the day we were rescued. Father, Mother, I dedicate Viet Kiru Andem to you. I love you." Nobody minded not being mentioned. Viet Kiru Andem got great reviews in the Times, Newsday, and the News. An okay review from the Post. Lam was cooking, entertaining, marketing, inviting CIA alumni in to try his light, healthy twists on Vietnamese staples, accompanied by just the right wine, recommended by a certified sommelier, Trung Phi Cam, a woman who had just emigrated from the old Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, and had heard about this brilliant Vietnamese chef starting this different kind of taste experience. The wine cellar was loaded with high-acid, low-alcohol wines, light, fresh Rieslings, Sauvignon Blancs, Pinot Noirs, even several Greek wines. Cam concentrated on a cellar full of light-bodied wines that wouldn't dominate Lam's rich flavors, but it would enhance the citrus and spice in Vietnamese dishes with similar notes. For beer drinkers, there were lower alcohol IPAs, clean lagers, and a large choice of white beers. Lam had written in his journal, "The alcohol must enhance, not overpower." He and Cam had succeeded extremely well. As Viet Kiru Andem became popular with the foodie circles, it began to bring more national attention. Food magazines, articles in national publications like USA Today all helped to create a buzz around Viet Kiru Andem that had it filled every night. What made his restaurant a unique experience was the executive chef himself. No matter how popular, no matter how long the waiting list, once a patron was seated at the table, they were not to be hurried, not to be rushed. Lam wanted everyone who walked through his doors to feel like they were walking into a Vietnamese family's kitchen. Okay, so it was dolled up in 7 shades of sea color, with round rather than square tables for more intimacy, and a full combination of eating utensils so all would feel welcome. High-quality chopsticks, fork, knife, Chinese soup spoon, and regular soup spoon. But the feel, what a patron sensed through the entire process, was of most importance to him. He loved wandering through the dining room, chatting with his guests, all his guests, from U.S. senators and movie stars to a couple on their 25th anniversary, or young people getting engaged. When Lam heard there was any kind of special occasion in the house, he always presented them with an 8-ounce champagne glass with Viet Kiru Andem on the glass, along with their logo, a rising 7-color ocean wave with a small boat on top, filled with either Champagne Perrier or a free bottle of whatever wine they had for their dinner. Even kids were treated with the glass. It was up to the parents what it was filled with, but usually it was Lam himself singing Happy Birthday off-key, getting the restaurant to join in, who delivered the glass along with a handshake for the boys and a hug for the girls. Late in the evening on Saturday, November 1st, 2008, a very slight, nervous girl appeared at the reservation desk. She was Vietnamese. She looked hungry, but she wasn't there for a table. In Vietnamese, "May I speak to the owner, please?" Lam was at the last table seated, a party of 10 celebrating their friend's 50th birthday. They had just finished the off-key happy birthday applause when Lam heard her request. He recognized the dialect from his area of Vietnam. In Vietnamese, "Hello, I'm Chef Lam. How may I help you?" looking down and away, still very shy, all in Vietnamese. Chef Lam, I saw my town's name on your sign. I'm looking for work. Can you help me? Have you ever worked in a restaurant before? I've never worked anywhere. I was going to school in An Dien. I was warned there were people who wanted to take me places, to do bad things. I borrowed some money, got a former neighbor of mine to sponsor me, and here I am. As he was listening, Lam couldn't help but think, oh God, it's me. It's how I looked. It's how I felt. It's time for me to help, to be a mentor. It's time for me to pay it forward. What's your name? Tui Thai Lei, Chef Lam. Where are you staying? Anywhere I can. The neighbor only promised to get me here, to this country, nothing else. You're staying outside or in a shelter? What's a shelter? For the next few weeks, Lei stayed with Cam, his sommelier, and her husband Jerry, a captain at Gallagher's Steakhouse. During the week, Lam trained Lei on the not-so-glamorous part of the restaurant business, bussing tables, washing dishes, cleaning the restaurant, both front and back room, kitchen, unloading deliveries, keeping what needed to be stocked, and what needed to be cleaned. Lam then moved Lei into the kitchen, stocking, cleaning, prepping, basically preparing her to accomplish any restaurant opportunity which didn't require any English. As 2008 rolled into 2009, Vit Kurandem's fortunes continued to sparkle like a diamond. The restaurant was always full, patrons and the press were raving about the food, the service, and the ambiance, and Chef Lam had just been invited to participate in a new show on the Food Network called Chopped, where he'd compete against 3 other chefs for a $10,000 prize. And then a wrench in the plans. A velvet wrench, but a wrench nonetheless. Cam's husband, Jerry, was from a town about 3 hours away from New York, Binghamton. Jerry had been aching to get away from the city and back to an easier life. He'd found a property on Court and State Streets for a new restaurant, had put down a deposit in October 2008 on the building, and had been renovating and redecorating since then. Cam had told Lam back in November that she'd be leaving. She just didn't know when. And now, in February 2009, it was time for the mad stretch to have Jerry's Steaks open by April 1st. There was one other item. They wanted Lei to go too. Cam explained that in Binghamton there was the American Civic Association, who specialized in immigration services, including ESL and citizenship classes, as well as assistance with green cards and other general information. In other words, everything that Lei would need to stay in the U.S. Wednesday, February 4th, Cam, Jerry, and Lei stopped by the restaurant on their way out. As they were about to leave, Lam handed Cam a check for $5,000. Cam said in English, Lam, what's this for? We're fine. We don't... Lam in English, it's not for you and Jerry. Whatever the cost is for Lei, take it out of this. If you need more, just let me know. Cam smiled, nodded, put the check in her pocket. Lam then went up to Lei. In Vietnamese, now, Miss Lei, I expect that the next time I see you, you'll be greeting me in English. She smiled. I promise. Thanks for everything. No. Thank you for your hard work and being such a good student. Now, go make sure these two, pointing to Cam and Jerry, get this restaurant thing right. Laughter from 3 people, a bemused, confused smile from Jerry. On Friday, April 3rd, Hoang Duc Lam woke up in Binghamton, a little tired but happy. He had participated in the grand opening of Jerry's Steaks last night. When he had arrived at the kitchen, he was greeted by Lei, who bowed and said in halting but excellent English, Good afternoon, Chef Lam. Welcome to Binghamton. Lam couldn't control his emotions. He laughed, threw his arms around Lei, and after a big hug, stepped back, bowed, and said in English, Thank you for the greeting, Miss Lei. Where are you putting me to work? You could almost hear Lei's brain translating from English to Vietnamese to English for the answer. She laughed. She figured it out, thought Lam. With me in the kitchen, Chef Lam. It was a fun evening for Lam. He worked American food with Lei, was introduced to patrons by Jerry, and even had a bit of fun with Cam and her wines, being brought to the table as a trainee, then expertly opening and pouring to the delight of folks expecting fumbling and spillage. It was a much different crowd than Lam was used to, but in a large way the pressure was off. Although Jerry and Cam did make a big splash about Lam attending their opening, and that he was going to be featured on the April 7th episode of Chopped, He was free to relax, to show his out-of-the-kitchen personality, which was friendly, outgoing, but always respectful of who he was speaking with, listening to what someone said, making them feel they were the most important person to Lam at that moment. He liked people. It showed that night. Toward the end of the evening, Lay asked Lam, in Vietnamese this time, if he would give her the honor of being her guest at her English as a second language class tomorrow at the American Civic Association. Lam immediately said yes, on the condition that she now ask him in English. Chef Lam, would you be my guest at my class tomorrow? Bow. I would be honored to join you. Bow. Cam and Jerry were living in a house downtown near the restaurants. It was only about a 15-minute walk to 131 Front Street and the American Civic Association. Although rainy and chilly, neither Lam nor Lee noticed, as Lam was questioning Lee about life in Binghamton in English, and Lee was doing very well in her responses. As they walked in, Lee was greeted warmly by the two receptionists, both of whom asked, "Is this him?" She giggled, said yes. Lam introduced himself, said he hoped he wouldn't be intruding, and was told he was part of the day's lesson. Laughing, he said to Lay in English, so the receptionist could understand, "So, you were that sure I'd say yes?" Laughter all around. Lay smiled and said, also in English, "You are too good a person to say no." "That's what she told us," said one of the receptionists. More laughter. Then Lay led the way to the classroom just off the main reception area. There, Lam was greeted by a sea of diverse faces: Brazilian, Pakistani, Haitian, Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino, Ukrainian, and the American teacher, a white-haired older woman who was substituting for a vacationing instructor. The teacher, Roberta, greeted Lay, asked her what seemed to be the number one question that morning. "Is this him?" This caused the entire class to laugh. Obviously, Lam thought, "I'm some kind of big deal here." Roberta smiled, shook his hand, and said, speaking slowly and distinctly so the class would understand, "Chef Lam, welcome to our ESL class. We have heard quite a bit about you." Laughter, applause. "Before we begin class, if you would you please share a little of your experiences with the class? We've been told you have a pretty amazing story." More laughter. Lam looked over at Lay. She was blushing. He smiled and bowed toward her. Then for the next 25 minutes, Lam told them of a 5-year-old kid who had his life saved by a U.S. destroyer, then by two kind and gentle souls who guided him along what started as a rocky and difficult path, but a path he knew was his path to cross and conquer. He covered the Culinary Institute, the 12 years of honing his craft, then the restaurant opening, and his present good fortune. He finished with this statement: "To succeed in this country, you not only have to have a deep belief in yourself, but for us as immigrants, we also must instill that deep belief we have in ourselves in others. If you believe in you, others will see that and believe in you too. My first few restaurant jobs were all due to people believing I could be a help to them and their business. They didn't see a skinny Vietnamese kid. They saw a hardworking, determined, willing to learn, skinny Vietnamese kid." There was laughter. "One success will build on another. I opened my restaurant because fellow school graduates believed in my work and..." He stopped, composed himself, continued. "My family was able to convince the Vietnamese population of San Jose to become my majority partners. The mother and father that I've known since the age of 5 believed in me. Their fellow Vietnamese immigrants believed in them, so they believed in me. Every day in my restaurant, I believe in my staff. They believe in my vision. And together, I believe we have the finest Vietnamese restaurant in New York. But that belief would mean nothing without our guests believing it as well. Believe in yourself. Work hard. Get others to believe in you too. Never burn a bridge. We can't afford to make any enemies in our new country. You really can succeed here in America. If a scared, wet 5-year-old kid can, anybody can. Thank you." Just as Lam started to move from the front of the class, he heard pop, 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 pop from the receptionist area. His 5-year-old self remembered that sound. Gun. He quickly looked to Lay, wide-eyed, terrified. She knew that sound too, as did a few of the folks in the room. Suddenly, the door burst open. A skinny, wild-eyed Vietnamese man, saying nothing, wearing a bright green jacket with a semi-automatic pistol in each hand, started firing. Lam didn't hesitate. As the screams surrounded him, he took a flying leap at Lay, trying to shield her with his body. He felt a searing pain across the right side of his head and a hammer blow in his upper right arm. As he grabbed Lay and fell on top of her, he could see that a bullet had entered her left forehead. He would find out later it was the same bullet that had grazed the side of his head. He covered her as best he could, trying not to put weight on his right arm, trying not to let this guy hear Lay's moans coming from underneath. Lam later found out the guy had fired for about 1 minute altogether. He fired 99 rounds in that 1 minute with his semi-automatic pistols, a 9mm Beretta 92 FS, and a Beretta PX4 Storm. Out of the 16 people in the room, he'd hit 13, including the instructor, who was dead. 11 others were dead in the classroom. One of the receptionists Lam and Lay had joked with just a half hour ago was killed. Lam saw the guy leave the room, then came back, then saw him put a pistol to his head for one final shot. Then just screams and moans. Lay had passed out. Lam hung on until the EMTs arrived. Lay was transferred immediately to Our Lady of Lourdes Memorial Hospital in Binghamton. Lam was sent to Wilson Medical Center in Johnson City, New York, where he had 15 stitches in the side of his head due to the grazing bullet and underwent surgery on his upper right arm to remove the bullet that partially had broken a bone. Before surgery, Lam contacted Jerry and Cam, told them what had happened, where Lay had been sent to, and to please call his restaurant and let them know he would not be there. Also to tell him immediately any news about Lay. It was Friday evening before Lam was finally in a room, Saturday morning before he could have outside visitors. Before lights out, he was visited by 2 Binghamton detectives, Steve Fitzgerald and Eileen Bozeman. They had also brought a Vietnamese high school teacher on the mistaken assumption that Lam spoke no English. It was while taking his statement that Lam found out about Lay's injury. Detective Fitzgerald said, "There were 2 sets of guys who were trying to protect their girls. Lay was not my girl, Detective. She was a friend of mine who was taking an ESL class while working at a new restaurant there in Binghamton." Okay, the other ones were married. They didn't make it. She did make it. He was torn up pretty bad, but it looks like he'll pull through. What about Lay, the woman I was trying to protect? Detective Bozeman, gentler than Detective Fitzgerald. The wound you received on the right side of your head grazed off you and struck her on the left front of her forehead. The challenge doctors are having over at Our Lady of Lourdes is that when the bullet grazed off you, it slowed just enough so that instead of exiting her brain and perhaps out of her skull, it's still in there. So doctors need to find it, see if they can get it out of there without inflicting any additional damage. Then it's a case of how much brain swelling there is and what they can do to see how much or how little this will affect her future life. Oh Christ, Lam thought, I've killed her. Why couldn't I have been 1 second quicker? Both detectives read the look that came over Lam's face. Fitzgerald was first. Sir, from what survivors tell us, you actually threw yourself in front of this guy while everyone else was trying to get away. You did everything you could. Then Bozeman, without you, she would never have had even this chance at survival. Suddenly, she stopped. Are you the chef that owns Viet Dem? Through the pain and the heartache, Lam remembered what he had just told the class. Yes, Detective. Oh, Chef Lam, you and your staff were wonderful to us. My husband and I went to the city for his 50th birthday, and we had a wonderful time. You wouldn't remember us. Yes, I do. You were there Saturday, November 1st, 2008. You were having such a great time you stayed late. Do you remember the young girl I was talking to after I went to your table? I do remember. Oh, my God. The detective eyes filled with tears. Her partner looked at her like, what's wrong? That was Tui Tai Lei. She came in asking for employment. On Saturday morning, Jerry and Cam came to visit and provided an update. Lei was out of surgery in a coma. The doctors were able to remove the bullet but could not even come close to providing any kind of prognosis for her. Without complications, Lam would be discharged on Monday. He wouldn't be working for a while. Cam had called everyone and let them know Lam would be back, but only to supervise and work front of the house. No kitchen work while the arm healed. Lam's mind was far from Viet Dem for the first time in years. All he could think about was Lei That hole in her forehead, the bullet that had been in her brain, the bullet that had been meant for him. Jerry and Cam came to pick him up. They first took him to Sal Stern's men's clothing store on 52 Court Street so he could buy new clothes to replace his bloody outfit. Then to Our Lady of Lourdes Memorial Hospital to visit Leigh. She was in the ICU unit, head bandaged, tubes coming out of the bandages, surrounded by medical equipment. Cam was talking. Jerry was talking. Lam said not a word. Cam looked at Lam. He was standing there, ashen face, tears pouring down his cheeks. Hard to pay it forward when you're paying it forward to is laying in a coma with chet teeth coming out of her head. The doctors didn't know when or if she'd wake up. They also didn't know when they'd move her to her room. When she stabilizes is all they'd say. Lam went back to New York, admonishing Cam and Jerry to let him know if anything changed and forgetting to thank them or wish them luck in their new restaurant. Decidedly un-Lam-like. Went to the restaurant, told the staff to hang in there. He was going to take the rest of the week off. No one had the nerve to tell him that he had planned a watch party several weeks ago at the restaurant for his Chopped episode, after he'd won, and that the place was going to be packed. He said if there were any challenges to call him, but that he'd be out of town, then left, packed a bag, then drove straight back to Binghamton, one-armed. For the next 5 years, with slight variations here and there, that was Lam's life. Spend a little time at the restaurant, just enough to make sure I hadn't fallen down, then head back to Binghamton. He hired general managers, executive chefs, accountants, all the positions he'd held for the first 4 years, now reporting to a man who only really cared about two things. One, that the restaurant made money, so he'd keep coming and spend time in Binghamton. And two, Tui Tai Leigh. After about 30 days, Leigh had stabilized and was put in a room, still in a coma, on life support systems. It was also about this time, just thereafter he'd received word that Leigh was being transferred, that Lam received a slightly oversized card with a Columbine, Colorado postmark. It wasn't the postmark that intrigued him. He had been wallowing in food, had CIA at the time, and had not been keeping up with the news. What stunned him was the first line written to him. Dear Lam, Quang and Ann would have been very proud of you. Hang too. Those were the names of his late parents and sister. Before leaving for Binghamton, he followed the directions and became Binghamton 17. Cam and Jerry had gone to visit Leigh in her new room and were stunned to see Lam there, tired, haggard, bags under his eyes. He had not told them he was in town. Month after month, she would lay there, silent, not moving. Lam would talk to her in both English and Vietnamese, read to her in both languages, and quite a bit of time either stared at her or out the window, seeing a boy wrapped around a rope. It was about 2 years in when the doctors told him there was nothing more they could do, that they were going to take her off life support. He begged, he pleaded, yelled, threatened legal action. He had no standing. He wasn't a relative, nor had he been mentioned in any of her personal belongings. They took her off her life support. She struggled. She gasped. She began breathing on her own. Still in a coma. Still unresponsive. For 3 more years, no change, no improvement. Finally, as Lam was packing yet again to head up to Leigh, he received the call he dreaded most, almost to the day, Monday, April 7th, 2014. She had passed peacefully overnight. He knew it was coming. He knew it was expected. The doctors and nurses, most of whom he knew by first name at this point, had tried to prepare him as best they could. He still wasn't prepared. Because of her Catholic upbringing, Lam, Jerry, and Cam were able to bury her at Calvary Cemetery, a Catholic cemetery in Johnson City. Lam paid for the gravestone. Tui Ti Lee, Banbi, friend, 1990-2015. By now, Lam was spending quite a bit of time on the site. It was there that he learned how many rounds the guy had fired in just 1 minute, close to a bullet every half second. It was during this time he also received Navy Yard 14 at his mentor, shortly after burying Leigh. And then there was Vit Kuru Andem. The guy with the 2 semi-automatics had not killed Lam, but he did kill his friend, and he most definitely killed Lam's restaurant. Lam had got back into the kitchen, but the fire, the passion, the immense enjoyment he got from his creation was gone. The public may not have the most discerning collective palate, but they can tell when no one cares. No one reordered the special glasses. No one purchased the finest quality ingredients anymore. No one made sure the restaurant was spotless, both in the front of the house and in the back of the house. After repeated health code violations, Vit Carew on Dem was shut for good on Monday, April 3rd, 2017, 8 years to the day when Lam woke up in Binghamton, New York, ready to visit an ESL class with a friend. Fortunately, his adopted parents, Min and Kim, were not alive to see this day. Min had died February 4th, 2016 of lung cancer. Like many Vietnamese, he'd been a prodigious smoker and it caught up to him at age 72. Kim passed away March 1st, 2017, also from cancer, this time breast cancer, which she had battled courageously for 3 years. She had been 70. Lam had tried to be a good son, to be there for them. There was only so much sorrow he could face. He would fly to San Jose, attend the funerals, fly out. He couldn't be at either of their burials. Couldn't. It was too much. It was overwhelming. And then a year later, Vit Carew on Diem was gone too. Lam never went without employment. His CIA connections made sure of that. However, with every interview, he made it crystal clear. He was not interested in an executive chef position. He was not interested in any position with authority. Sous chef, line cook, fine. Executive, anything, no. This was the state of mind Lam had when he met Ray Wilson at LaGuardia Airport on Tuesday, July 3rd. Ray had caught flight 1048 out of Miami at 8:31 a.m. after a goodbye breakfast with Donnie and Les. Had a 2-hour stopover at Reagan National where he and Maxine had coffee before their respective next flights. Then on to New York on American Flight 2123, which landed in LaGuardia at 2:11 p.m. He met Lam at the Five Guys in Terminal B. Lam was seated with a water and a double cheeseburger with fries. Across from him was a double hamburger, fries, Diet Coke. Chef Lam, I'm Ray Wilson. I see Max paved my way. Not a chef anymore, Mr. Wilson. Who's Max? Damn, I keep forgetting. On the site, we all use the names given. Off the site, I use everyone's actual name. Navy Yard 14 is Maxine. I call her Max. She told you no cheese. Yes, Mr. Wilson, she didn't just tell me. She was emphatic. Laughter from Ray, mild chuckle from Lam. Please call me Ray, and yeah, can't explain it, but I hate cheese. Except pizza, but it's got to be loaded pizza. Bunch of stuff on top. But otherwise, I hate cheese. Before my wife passed, I heard, sorry. Thanks, that's why I'm here. Anyway, I didn't want to tell Max, but one of my last dates before getting married was to your place. She told me I'd love it because there was no cheese anywhere, and what the hell, she was right. It was great. Well, thank you. That was before everything. I'm happy you have good memories of my restaurant. Over burgers and fries, Ray discussed the plan. Lam asked more questions than any of the other assaulted had. Good questions, strategic questions, the type and quality of questions a good businessman would ask. Okay, Ray, I'm in. I always have to ask, Lam. This is a Max question. Are you sure? Very, very sure? Put Maxine's thoughts to rest. Tell her I have someone to avenge, like you. Someone who had no chance against a guy who was able to shoot 99 rounds in 1 minute. I'm in, Ray. Ray called Maxine later that night. He's in. Yeah, I thought he would be. It's sad, though. I didn't tell you, but I ate at his restaurant once. I didn't tell you. So did I. No shit? No shit. He was filled with sadness, Max. Just poured out of him. Such tragic waste. Maxine heard it. A soft sigh. This one touched Ray hard. You okay, Ray? Yeah. I just know how he feels. What else you got for me? I got one in Manchester, Connecticut, not far from you. Manchester 29.